Hey, this is Josh Weibman with REI 360 here. Thanks for joining us for today's training. Today what I want to talk about is something I stumbled upon in my business over the last week that, it has come up time and time again in my rehabs, and I just thought maybe it was something we could cover. And that is dealing with a home inspector, and more specifically, planning your rehabs based on on knowing that there's going to be a home inspector in the property. Now, if you have never flipped a property, this is going to be something that you're probably going to yawn and glaze over, and you're going to move on with. But if you've ever flipped a property and gotten to the point where you have a buyer, the property is under contract, they've hired a home inspector to come out and look at the house, and all of a sudden, all of the small, tiny imperfections and irregularities in the house are magnified, you know how important building the property or doing repairs based on a home inspector can be. So that's what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about first, what is a home inspector, and kind of get to the point of taking it full circle on how you can, even to the point where you're making your offers, keep in mind that a home inspector is going to be in the property. So let's start with what is a home inspector. If you've never bought a property before, a home inspector is someone that is hired to come out, take a look at a piece of real estate, and give you their opinion on what is good, bad, or indifferent about the property. Typically, these are people that have either been contractors. Each state has different licensing, but typically it's a licensed position that you need to go through testing for and updated education on a fairly consistent basis. But it's the kind of thing that to do a thorough home inspection on a normal size 3 or 4 bedroom house, 1 or 2 bathrooms, it's going to take anywhere from 3 to 5 hours to really go through the house. They really pull the entire property apart, top to bottom. They're going through crawl spaces. They're getting on the roof. They're going into the basement. They're looking at the structure of the house, the mechanics, and basically the entire property beyond what your buyer probably sees when they walk in the property. And then they tell all this stuff to the prospective buyer. Historically, but not even historically, the home inspector is a really important part of the retail market. It's a really important part of the consumer marketplace, and it is because most of us, myself included to a certain extent, we might know something about building and something about real estate, but we probably don't have the kind of expertise that a home inspector might. So, especially for first-time home buyers or even people that are buying 2 or 3 properties over the course of their life, you want to hire an expert to come in, walk you through the property, and point out any problems, imperfections, issues. Now, if you're going through a retail sale, you want to hire a home inspector. But very much like the entire rest of the real estate industry, when the bubble burst a couple years ago, home inspectors, they went under the microscope just like everybody else. Banks were out of money to lend. Even when they were bailed out, they weren't lending. Mortgage brokers, some of them went to jail. So, there was some funny stuff going on there. The entire industry was rewritten. With home inspectors, basically they're hired to look out for the consumer. And there was lots of instances of, instead of a 3 or 4 hour home inspection, a 30-minute home inspection being done where you really can't look thoroughly at anything. And so a lot of people got sued, and at the end of the day, there was the backlash. Just like we've had in all the other parts of real estate, you had the backlash with home inspectors as well. And they've kind of gone off the deep end. They've gone off the deep end, and they are pointing out absolutely everything that could go wrong, and they want to put it in writing so that if anything ever goes wrong with that property, they're not the one holding the bag. That's where you need to keep in mind when you are putting together your construction project. On a flip, you need to keep them in mind. You have to put them in your forefront and know that they are going to point everything and anything out to your prospective buyer. Why does it matter? First and foremost, most people buy 2 or 3 houses in their entire life. So, if somebody comes in who is an expert and tells them, they're already going through a pretty stressful process of purchasing a property and moving, but an expert comes in and tells them, oh my goodness, this is what's wrong. You've got a crack in the foundation. they might turn around and run for the hills, even though a crack in the foundation might just be settlement that needs a little concrete and paint. Oh my goodness, there is this heater's not working properly. Oh, holy cow, there's some damage to the roof. All of these things are going to, number one, they could tip off a buyer and make them, basically walk away from the deal. Second thing it could do is it's going to reopen negotiations. So every single thing that home inspector lists on their home inspection report, it can be a request now for the buyer to get a concession on the sales price. You already had an agreement of sale, but now they want to come back and they want to say, well, listen, I'd like a couple extra $1,000 off, or I want this, I want you to take care of that. It's going to cost you money. And the third reason is that it has a major impact, if not on the dollar amount, if the property is still going to close, it's going to prolong the closing process. And time is money. So it's very important. This is why we're going to keep in mind that the home inspector is going to come in there and he's going to point out all these flaws. So when I go into a project, there's 3 specific areas that I look at when I'm doing my inspection of the property before I even make an offer, make the purchase. These are the same areas that I focus attention on when I'm going through the rehab process. I pay special attention to the subcontractors that I'm using, reminding them over and over and over that everything's got to be clean, everything's got to be right, because I know that if it's not, it's going to be brought up. First area are the mechanicals. The mechanicals of the property. This includes plumbing, electric, and HVAC. So the plumbing, if you have slow running sinks and showers and tubs, it probably means there's an issue with the drain line. This might just be in one bathroom. It might just be in the kitchen. It might be the entire line out to the out to the city hookup. Or if there's a well and a septic tank, it might be a problem with the septic line or the septic tank. Maybe it just needs to be pumped, but maybe it needs something a little bit more extensive. Electrical, if there are outlets that don't work, if the electrical is if the box is too small for the property. What I mean there is you typically have a 100 or 200 amp service depending on the size of the property. Newer homes are going to have a 200 amp service because you've got a lot more electronics today than even just a few years ago. But is the box adequate? Is the service line coming in? Are there frays on the line that are coming into the property? If there are, that's going to need to be addressed. If the property is old, how's the wiring in the house? I mean, does it have the old knob and tube wiring? If it does, all of that wiring has got to come out, and we got to put new wiring in through the entire house, which is very costly. We're going to be talking $7,000, $10,000, $15,000 just to rewire the property. These are things that home inspector is going to bring up. Are all the outlets working? Are there outlet covers? The little stuff here, this is the stuff that is going to, if the little things are wrong, it's going to create an opening for that inspector to pry further and further and further and bring up more and more potential issues. So you want to make sure all of these things are tightly tied up. And HVAC, the heating and cooling system in the house. How old's the heater? When was it last serviced? Are you sure that it's gonna, it's gonna pass any kind of test? Is it vented properly? Is it in working order, for that matter? Is the air conditioning unit, does that work properly? Is everything working well? Is it in good condition? When I go in through my initial inspection of the property when I'm making my offer, if the heater looks old and beat up, even if it doesn't look beat up, I'm going to put it on my list to replace. If the air conditioning, compressor needs to be replaced, I put it on my list. I have the budget for that stuff, even if they're working, because at the end of the day, it's going to be something that's going to be brought up at the last minute that can make or break the deal. The second major area that I'm looking at after mechanicals is I'm looking for structural items. Now, I'm not talking about an issue where you have an entire floor that's collapsing. There's obviously structural issues there. I'm not even talking about structural issues where you look at the outside of the house and it looks like the exterior wall is leaning, or these are obvious things that are going to be brought up. What I am talking about is stuff like cement work, things like your walkways. Are your walkways smooth, or is there a tree root that's pushing up one block of the sidewalk? If there's a tree root that's pushing up a block of the sidewalk, budget to replace that block so everything's nice and smooth, so there's no tripping hazard. Is there, if there's brick or there's stone on the outside of the house, are all of the grout lines, are they in good condition? If the mortar's been falling out, it's going to need to be replaced. You're going to have to brick point the house. Budget for it. If you've got cracks on the foundation walls in the basement, you better believe that you want to skim coat those walls and make them nice and smooth. And I'm not talking about covering anything up. I'm just saying you want to make sure that they're cosmetically appealing. It's very important. That's cement. We also have the roof. The roof is a big one. If you've put on a roof in the last 10 years, it's probably fine, but it might not be. Even if it is fine, you better have documentation that has some kind of warranty or roof certification. Because if you don't, you're gonna have to hire a roofer to come out there and give you some kind of certification on the roof. So if you're looking at rehabbing a property, either have documentation when the roof work was done, have a certification that can be transferred to the next owner, or replace the roof. If you don't do that, it will certainly be brought up by the home inspector. And the basement. Is the basement dry? Is it wet? Is it a crawl space? And I go back to the foundation. I know that in my market, there are a ton of houses that are built on stone foundations, and the cosmetics of the interior wall, houses are 50 or 60 years old, they start to crumble. It doesn't mean the foundation is crumbling, but it sure looks bad. Cleaning up that wall brings the aesthetics in and makes the house look a heck of a lot better, and it's one last thing to go on the report. The third area is safety. Safety is a big one, but there's a couple subcategories here. First, you want to take a look at smoke detectors. Make sure that they're in all of the places they're supposed to be, at least one on every floor, depending on how large the square footage is. You want one within 10 or 15 feet of each bedroom, as well as on each floor. You also want carbon monoxide detectors depending on your the type of heating system. If you have natural gas in the property, you certainly want carbon dioxide and monoxide detectors within the vicinity of the bedrooms. Lead paint is a big one. If the house was built before 1978, there's likely going to be lead paint in the house. Now there's two types of certifications that you can get here, either lead-free or lead-safe. Depending on your municipality, your township or whatever, there's two ways that you can go with this. Here's what I recommend in my area. I go for a lead safe, which means that all peeling paint has been scraped and sanded so that there's smooth edges. All of the paint, all of the surfaces of the house have been cleaned. The areas have been primed and painted, which means there's really no exposure to lead-based paint. Doesn't mean that it's not in the property, but it's one of those things that a home inspector could bring up. And if it's peeling paint is in your face, he's going to bring it up. Radon testing. Sometimes there's a radon system in the house. It really depends on the area of where you are. And basically, when you're talking about safety, you want to just make sure that any obvious items that could be brought up during the home inspection are addressed. It will make it, much, much more simple if it's done beforehand than after the fact. Specifically with safety, these are items that will scare buyers away, both with safety and when they talk, the inspector is taking a look at the foundation and makes notes about the foundation and things like that. These are things that, they might be a few $100 extra in the cost of your overall project, but will save you a lot of time and a lot of money if they're budgeted for first. So let's talk about the application. How do you do this? First, the application of dealing with the home inspector starts before the project begins, and it starts before you have your scope of work, and it starts before you ever buy the house. When you walk into a property, you have to look at it like you're going to be a retail buyer, and you might have the best of, the best eyes to see what something could be. Typically, most of us look at what things could be in light of the cosmetic stuff. Man, we have a beautiful kitchen over here. This bathroom is gorgeous. We'll put a jacuzzi tub there. All of that could be wonderful, but if you don't have running water and electricity, what do you have? You got a couple boxes hanging on the wall. You got a a fish tank in the bathroom. What you really need to keep an eye on is what are the major functionality, what are the mechanical items, what's the condition of the mechanical items in the house, the electric, the plumbing, the heating, the air conditioning. What is the condition of all of the structural elements, the cement work, brickwork, the roof, the basement, all of these items that if they're budgeted for, it won't cost much. And also safety, smoke, lead paint, the existence of radon and other items which can scare away buyers. You want to take all of that into consideration before you even make an offer, because the difference might be $5,000 or $10,000 in the course of your offer that can make or break a deal. It could also be that $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 on the front end, but by the time you get to closing, you might lose a buyer because they get scared away. You might, you're going to lose profits, and that $10,000 or $20,000 ends up being $30,000 or $40,000 on the back end, as opposed to maybe as little as $5,000 on the front end. So when you're setting your budget, if you're negotiating and it's a question of whether you should replace the heater or put granite countertops into the property, replace the heater. The granite countertops, they can be an upgrade. Put in a laminate countertop. Spend your money on making a property work correctly and be safe and clean before you spend money on the glitter. There's time to put money into that, but initially the money's got to go into making the property work well. And then third step is double check. Basically, go back through at the end of the project. If you know going in, these are the items that have to be right, double check your contractors. I can't tell you how many times. In fact, before we're done today, I'm going to tell you what happened on this most recent home inspection as a word to the wise. Double checking your contractors is really important. I don't care if they worked with you for years or this is the first time you're dealing with them. You know what you want and you know what your objectives are. And you got to make sure that your contractors are on the same page. So this most recent home inspection, the house turned out really, really well. We replaced almost everything from the top to the bottom. New windows, new roof, new heating system, electrical system. We replaced all of the supply lines, plumbing throughout the property. The waste lines were fine. We upgraded the electrical box, and literally every piece of wiring in the entire house is new. So, yesterday was the home inspection. I noticed on one of the radiators in the property was never hooked up. It was on my final punch list, but I didn't do the double check. That was pretty obvious to the home inspector. In addition, there were a couple small items on the heater and the hot water heater that were not done. They were not things that are, they weren't going to cause the house to burn down. There weren't safety issues, but there were items that were noted both for a brand new heater and a brand new hot water heater that should have never been on the home inspection as flags. In the garage, which is attached to the property, there were some cracks in the ceiling, which I didn't even think, or I don't know, it was stupid, but I didn't even think that could be an issue, so I didn't address them. It's on the home inspection report. Cracks in the drywall, something I'm going to have to address. There were a number of small items that all added up to, thank goodness I was dealing with a buyer's agent who really did a great job of working with the buyer and letting them know that these things are not a big deal and that they'll be taken care of prior to closing. But it could have cost me a really good buyer on a great project. Probably would have cost me another month or two of the property sitting on the market. And it's not something I wanted to encounter. So, dealing with a home inspector is really important. It starts from day one before you even take ownership or before you even make an offer on a property. If you keep an eye on the home inspector, you'll be able to present a property to your buyer that is mechanically sound, it's safe, and at the end of the day, it works the way it's supposed to. And that's what buyers want at the end, anyway. They want a place that they can call home, that they can move into, and just live there with a peace of mind that their surroundings are in great shape. And if you can make it cosmetically appealing as well, you're going to have just a fantastic career as a flipper and an investor. You'll make money, and you'll have buyers that are just thrilled to recommend their friends to you. So anyway, that's our training for today. Just remember, keep the home inspector in mind as you plan your flips. And until we see you next time, thanks for joining us for our training today, and best of luck in your real estate investing.